Thank you, Miranda, for coming today, and thank you, Suzanne and Joy, for agreeing to sit on my committee. Yeah, I feel that I've been very blessed with the amount of support that I've received for this, this research. So my study title currently is a pilot study in music therapy as procedural support for EEG testing in a pediatric medical setting. It's quite a lengthy title. As I'll share with you today, it's gone through many changes. I might be one of the few members of our cohort that really stuck with the same idea, literally from week 1 of class through today, which is not typical for me, but I think part of that is because of the support that I received both here and at Children's Hospital. But when I say I stuck with the same idea, again, you'll see that it went through many, many different changes, which really is the emphasis of my presentation today. I will certainly be sharing methods with you and some statistics that were very preliminary statistics, but you'll see by the end kind of where we're at right now and how in many ways we've kind of come full circle, I suppose. So this was me a few years ago before I entered graduate school. Young, so whole world in front of me. I have to give an enormous acknowledgement to Dr. Al Ozanoff and also to Miranda because of the connection that she helped me make with Dr. Ozanoff. I really don't think I could have done this without all the support I've received, but in particular with Dr. Ozanoff, the Director of Center for Patient Safety and Quality Research, being a renowned biostatistician, a Harvard professor, and also a really, really decent human being who's very generous with his time, and it made an enormous difference. So you'll notice as I go through this, there are some inconsistencies, and that's because at Children's, they kind of view this one way. In other words, Dr. Ozanoff is actually the PI on this. It needed to be that way because I'm there part-time. So it will say that I'm the co-PI and Miranda's co-investigator. We have like a certain protocol over there, whereas when I did the IRB here, Suzanne and I are co-PIs. You'll see the difference. And then I try to connect it all together in a way to make sense of it. So this is the list from my latest proposal with Miranda as the co-investigator. I have 2 child life specialists. This has also been a wonderful opportunity to really work together in a new way with child life. We've been working together for so many years, but we've never really done research together in this way. And when I say in this way, I mean we're literally, it's really co-treating. We're really, I'll get to the protocol in a moment, but we're very much in it together. And then I've had a wonderful intern all year long as my research assistant, Hannah Foxman. That will be changing in a few weeks, but we're very lucky to have Mark Fuller, who will be who's doing trainings hopefully as we speak, so he can move right into that position. So this is the entire committee on both ends, I guess, Berkeley and Boston Children's, and yeah, so quite a few involved. So just a very brief history of music therapy at Boston Children's Hospital. Somewhere in the 90s, we began with a program through Berkeley, really, set up to supervise practicum students, and I was there early on, and most of you have probably heard this story, but and I basically graduated here and was back there within a year or two on neurology. So keep that in mind, neurology, because it comes back up in a moment. It's also where I met Miranda and when she was an intern, so we've had a very long history working together in different roles. We have a patient family-centered approach at Boston Children's Hospital, which has always worked well for me because that was very much my thinking coming out of Berkeley, a very music-centered and client-centered approach. Evidence-based, we've been saying evidence-based for a long time. I'll be very honest, I feel like we're now getting to the point where we can start providing some of this evidence ourselves, and that's very exciting. So we're not just looking for evidence elsewhere, but we can start pointing to our own evidence soon, I hope. And the latest challenge, which I think is a good challenge, has been integrating research with procedural support so that it's running parallel. In other words, we're doing research on what clinical interventions we're already providing. So it's not set up as a separate schedule for research. It's part of our regular hours every week. And this has worked really well, I think, so that we can maintain the same consistency of care that's so important, and then, you know, spend additional time analyzing the data we collect. But really, in a way, the idea is so that it's so seamless that the patient maybe wouldn't even know that the research is actually going on, which becomes a big part of where the study is right now. So you're probably wondering where this is, why this is on here. In Suzanne's guide, she said to include interesting things, artistic, and quotes. And so I was just going to tell you, a few weeks ago, it was actually before my research was approved, I was trying to maintain my vision and my belief in this is all going to work out. And I heard a podcast about that song Hallelujah. And to summarize this podcast, basically the idea was that creativity comes in a lot of different forms. There are some who are more like Picasso, the savant. He just painted and there it is and it's perfect. And there are some who are more like Cezanne. So Cezanne would go back and change it and rip it up and throw it away and do it again. And it was a never-ending process. The interesting thing is Picasso said Cezanne was his one and only master despite all of their differences. As I was listening to the podcast, I thought, I'm becoming more like Cezanne. Like, I no longer think anything I'm doing is that, there it is, it's marvelous, it's perfect. No. Like, I've become a very good self-editor, going back and rereading. And I think in the end, that's one of the main things I've learned from this, is that it's okay at times to integrate left and right brain a little bit more, and it doesn't need to be feared, I suppose. So that was kind of an inspiration. And then I went back and thought about, this is actually what's in the podcast. They also used this Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan comparison. Bob Dylan writing many songs in 15 minutes, and then, there it is, it's perfect. And Leonard Cohen writing Hallelujah, and for 7 years going back and changing the lyrics and trying it and tweaking it. And, oh, that verse didn't seem to really connect with the audience quite the right way. And so in a way, it was almost like doing research on his own song, which then, took on a life of its own. And in many ways, then became replicable because so many others have done that song and interpreted it in new ways. All right, so where did this start? Pondering a research question. I went back and viewed a lot of old footage when I was really thinking about this first assignment that Suzanne gives us in our first class. Where are our questions? What do we feel we need to have some answers about? And so this was an old video from Dana-Farber where I felt like I was doing really meaningful work but didn't have many opportunities to really do research about the work. Groups at Dana-Farber, other work at Dana-Farber, and now work more recently that we're doing at Children's Hospitals. So trying to think about all the different units, where do I think it's most important that I could really set up research that would be meaningful, that would answer some questions. And there were so many factors that went into this. What I ended up coming up with, I had 3 questions. One had to do with work I'm doing at Beth Israel with psychiatric patients. Another had to do with work at Children's, but more focused on respiratory illness. And then the third one, and this was like September 20th, 2015. It's remarkably similar to where my study ends up going. So this idea of procedural support during EEG, I mean, this is literally probably where I was my very first week at Children's Hospital, providing music that helps with lead placement. So for those of you not familiar, the children are having electrodes placed between 16 and 32 all over their scalp. They have to remain very, very still. There's a tech, there's sometimes child life specialists, sometimes additional nurses. And what I've been finding, just based on my own experience, not based on research, is that oftentimes when bringing music in, they may need fewer nurses, fewer additional support staff. I've been told it goes smoother and perhaps it's finished sooner. And so years of that, I started thinking back on and then recognizing, well, maybe there's something there. Now, my first thought was actually incorrect. I had a conversation with the child life specialist, and she was actually talking about MRI. I thought she was talking about EEG, and she was saying she noticed just playing the iPad music was making a difference during MRI in terms of how much sedating medication was being used. And I thought, that's it. I'll measure use of sedating medication. I'll measure the time that it takes. Like, I've got it. Not so fast. But in really digging deeper, which is a theme for me that I'm going to keep going back to, digging deeper into EEG and having it not just part of what I'm doing every week, but now I'm thinking of it as the focus of my research, I needed to really look to the literature and learn about, why is this being done? Well, it's being done for a lot of different reasons. You might think of seizure disorders, that's certainly part of it. But this test could be used for any change in behavior, for sleep disorders. We have a sleep lab at Children's Hospital where they're trying to figure out, why is this child not sleeping well? Music can be really helpful in helping the child fall asleep for that test in a natural way. 460,000 children in the U.S. under the age of 18 currently being treated for seizure disorders alone. That's not to mention any of the other reasons why these children might be having EEG testing. Many children with autism have EEG tests done to measure brain activity. Let's see. One of the things that I really was thinking about early on was cost effectiveness. At first, this was primarily looking to Walworth's study because of some of the data that she collected, and looking at studies where sedating medication was no longer needed at all when music therapy was brought in. Time reduced, extra staff not needed, and sedating medication not needed at all. So that was a major focus. I believe a year ago when I was sharing some information about this with you, that was a major focus for me initially. So this was my first, this was a coincidence, I suppose. So the very same month that I started thinking about this, Miranda received an email from neurology about the music therapy program and quality improvement, and they're really looking for numbers, and can we do a report where we're talking about new things, new developments, because we've had this relationship for a while. I didn't see this email right away, but when Miranda shared it with me, I thought, you have to be kidding. I'm just thinking about this research idea. It has to do with neurology. So we had a meeting, and we all got together and decided this could be a good fit for everyone. So this is my first attempt, my first draft, 15-page draft. And back then, a lot of this language now I'll be honest, I cringe. Effectiveness, that's not it. It's the effect, not the effectiveness. I was thinking mixed methods originally. I was actually thinking explanatory sequential mixed methods design, that I definitely needed the interview, the pre-interview, collect quantitative data during the actual procedure, and then a survey after. And I was definitely feeling like this was all essential, so that one would kind of explain the other. That if it's not enough to just have the quantitative data, but I also needed this qualitative information to put it into context. So this was really important for me at this time. Next semester, I stuck with it. I changed it to convergent parallel mixed methods design. So no longer a part A and a part B, but at the same time measuring these different the different quantitative and qualitative data. And now I did change it to a feasibility study. I received very good advice from my advisor that perhaps I was thinking a little bit too big. Because the original one, I was thinking an RCT. I really wanted to just do a randomized controlled trial. And if I'm laughing, it's because now it sounds a little over the top based on the experience that I've had with the IRB at Children's Hospital. But so I scaled it back a bit. I was thinking just 20 patients. Feasibility study with 20 patients, and we'll collect data, we'll have a control group, we'll have an experimental group, and a lot of it will also be just testing the measures, testing recruitment, testing all of these things. A study we can really build on is my idea. Then through the summer, I didn't have real numbers, so I ran mock numbers with Dr. Susan Rogers, who was magnificent at helping me understand statistics. I had very little experience with statistics, and I was amazed to run numbers and, well, let me get to it. These are not actual patients, but I'm thinking this could be me. I could see time in minutes. It could be this. This could be significant. This is going to be amazing. Then I look at this one. These were just random numbers, but it would take a lot. The other one was time in minutes. So I realized that looking at time in minutes, you could see a significant effect. That seemed reasonable. I recognized in looking at this, it would take a pretty significant difference with such a small sample a significant difference in terms of control and experimental group in the number needing sedating medication, because it was binary for me. It was they either needed sedating medications or they didn't need it. I let go of the idea of measuring dosages. That was way beyond the depth that I needed to dig with this study. So, and you'll notice a theme for me. A lot of this ends up being about letting go and simplifying and refining and narrowing. So, yeah, so this is a year later, literally a year later. First meeting with Dr. Ozanoff and Miranda was incredibly informative. We talked about everything from the very first steps I needed to take to make this a reality at Boston Children's to the bigger picture. Dr. Ozanoff still has great ideas about writing for grants, for larger studies, but he was pretty clear even in the first week of us working together that those grants would be much more likely to receive, in other words, that funding would be more likely to be channeled our way if we were also including a smaller pilot study with our application, not just based on our idea of what maybe could work, and not just other studies that had worked well. So we came to the agreement that I would not be writing for a grant at that time, but perhaps revisit things a year later, which is coming up. Decided on a timeline, and at my first kind of early education about not just the IRB, because I knew there would be an IRB, there's also this Nursing Research Council that I didn't know much about, so I really needed to learn about. Let's see, I then had a meeting with Dr. Allen, Dr. Hanser. We continued to refine methods, brought in new information into the literature review. The Claire Getty article on procedural support became extremely central in focusing the methods, the methods in terms of the actual music therapy methods I would be utilizing as part of the protocol. And there's a wonderful image I'll share with you in a moment. In many ways, it's like a picture says 1,000 words. It's perfect in terms of, when I saw it, I thought, that's what I'm doing. Claire Getty just says it better, and her image is so crystal clear. Let's see. And at this time, start recognizing we need to work on assent forms, consent forms. All these different elements are important. So this may be the same at other hospitals, but I'm just basing it on Boston Children's. Starting with the scientific review, and that's going to include, in my case, I don't know if it's in every case, but I was assigned a nurse scientist mentor. So in addition to Dr. Ozanoff, I also had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Jennifer Cahill, an incredibly knowledgeable and motivated, really enthusiastic about music therapy nurse who helped me better understand what the IRB would be looking for. Really helped me look at my study through a new lens, through the nurse scientist lens. So she also helped me recognize that there were going to be many revisions. She would always say, now we're going to submit this, but don't be surprised if you receive feedback. That's to be expected. She would always say that. That's to be expected. I would still be surprised and a little disappointed, but she'd always say, that's fine. That's what happens. That's part of this process. So she helped me to better understand that. And Dr. Cahill has done a lot of great research at MGH and at Yale as well. Honestly, the most important part of those relationships, I think, had to do not just with all the knowledge that they brought, but how excited they were about music therapy. We felt it during the meetings. Like, we didn't have to convince them. They actually read my preliminary drafts, and they were excited about making this work. So that was invaluable, just the enthusiasm and energy and time that they gave. So I now had a better understanding that we had to go make it through the scientific review before we even got to the IRB. So they had to determine, was this scientifically feasible? What was the science behind this? Was the data collection something that they could stand behind? Was this likely to succeed? Was this likely to present anything worthwhile, something that they want connected to the Children's Hospital name? And then, the final stage that I'm actually just at now, implementation. This is from our first meeting, where I brought everyone together. Okay, this is extremely important, and I'm a little embarrassed to say, but this is a year in. This is when I find out it's not sedating medications. the reason I have not been seeing sedating medications is because they do not use sedating medications during the EEG lead placement. They do use it during MRIs. Now, when I've been reading a lot of the literature, it's a Boston Children's thing. There are other places where they do use sedating medications. However, the moment they mention this as a restraint that is often or sometimes used, let's say, I realized I was kind of saved. That this was another measure, and I mean, you could argue which is more important or which is more, which would be, in other words, the bringing in music and seeing a reduction in the use of mechanical restraints, to me, was also a good thing. And when I started looking to the literature, this was the view of many others in the field, including the two child life specialists who I was working with. And they admitted that the reason I didn't know about this is because they had not seen it happen during music therapy. But it does often happen when they are not present, and sometimes when they are present. So I realized, okay, this is the new thing that I'm measuring, in addition to the time. Let's see. There's a lot here. Yeah, so began the IRB application online even after I had submitted. It had not been accepted yet, but I submitted for the scientific review right before the new year, and then started working on the IRB application ahead of time. First, this is interesting. So within days, I right away received feedback saying, scale back to a descriptive study, and my mind is blown. Like, no, that's not what I have in mind. Like, the descriptive study, that's not me. That's not what I'm going to do. But they said, unless I could use a validated tool, use a better tool because the tool I had just created. I had created this tool. It had not been used elsewhere. I just based it on my own experience. It made sense to me. They might have thought, well, maybe it makes sense, but use a validated tool. So Suzanne pointed me towards Yinger's article here and the Child Adult Medical Procedure Interactive Scale, revised. Loved reading about this tool. Looks like an amazing tool. I would love to use this in a future study. As I read more and more about it and thinking about my current situation and our one intern assisting me, a lot of the ways that it would need to be analyzed, the training that would go into the analysis, it did not seem feasible. I felt like I would be setting myself up to not have this even approved by graduation. So I decided, they had given me this other option. I decided, let's start simple, really simple. And I'm going to kind of go more quickly through some of this, because what you're basically going to see is there's a lot of communication, a lot of revision. This was great to see because the scientific review on February 16th said, they're recommending for this to move forward, grant approval. However, then they give 7 recommendations. It's approved, and we also recommend you change all 7 of these things. So it's kind of like good news, and wow, I've got a lot of work to do. And it's not; these aren't just small things; these are big things. Once I decided descriptive study, I thought, well, I'm going to leave the age range completely open. Let's just see what happens. Let's see who's referred. I didn't want to make any assumptions, and they kind of came back and said they really wanted the age range to be as narrow as possible. So I'm having to balance all these things and think about like sample size, and is it a descriptive study, what is it really? In the end, we did kind of compromise, and also Dr. Cahill said these things were not set in stone. These were recommendations that they felt would, they strongly recommended in submitting this to the IRB, but they were also allowing it to go through to the IRB. So it was kind of up to not just me, but to Dr. Osimoff, Dr. Cahill, and I to figure out the best way forward. And then they kind of let us know next steps to take here. So we changed the data collection form based on some of the recommendations for the way, every little thing is what I learned here, is like every aspect of data collection is essential. If there's something a little bit off about it, then the data is not worth using. So they pointed out some really good things having to do with the way time should be measured, making sure that if I'm measuring restraints, yes or no, the type of restraint, even though I could make assumptions about it, based on what I had been told, making sure that this is as thorough as possible a tool. And then we also wanted to collect as much demographic information as we could. However, we also wanted a waiver of consent. And this was a really interesting sticking point because I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Dr. Ozanov said, no, that will not likely get through. That's going to be challenging. Dr. Cahill really said, I think it will work. I've talked to some members of the council. I think it's a good idea. And she explained her side of it. And in the end, Dr. Ozanov kind of said it was up to me. So I went for it, and I can just, no suspense around it. I did get a waiver of consent because of the fact that it's an observational, really minimal risk study where I'm just doing and facilitating as I always do. There's nothing about it that is out of the ordinary. And even the collecting of the data, I'm accessing records I already have access to. And even the fact that my research assistant, my intern, will be there, she often would be there observing what I'm doing anyways and taking notes on it. But we really had to make this point. You'll see there's a lot of back and forth around it. But March 16th, the scientific review got completed, and kind of like Kevin yesterday, I was like, yes, you know, this is it. Well, yeah, but that's just the first step. In the meantime, I had to do many more training. So this is a training just about the data collection tool that I'm going to be using for the study. So this has to be created. You know, this has to be created. It is internal. It is encrypted. It is safe. It's FDA approved. It's I mean, this is a registered study that we're doing, so everything needs to be by the book. I thought, I naively thought that data collection sheet that I just used should just sit there and check off. Like, no, this will all be done. Miranda has a lot of experience with this tool for creative arts research. The great thing about it is it can be used on any device. Once it's set up, you can use it on a device. You can use it on an iPad, and it can be offline, and then you can upload it to the safe server. So more revisions, and every time that you do revisions, you have to submit a very formal letter explaining everything that you did within the IRB and everything that you changed, and then go back and change it within the protocol. So I keep writing the proposal all over and over again, because if there's anything inconsistent, it will get sent back. You then have to do a PI training. Even though I wasn't technically the PI, I'm considered the project lead on this, so you go through a whole training about how to be a good project lead, the fact that they may audit you at some point, and that's also a good thing, apparently. It doesn't seem like that would be a good thing, but this is extremely informative, and also, as with every member of the research team over there, Eunice Newbert really helped me as the educator here to continue putting this into perspective. She was telling me, this is moving quickly for you, Brian. This is, this is expedited. I said, yeah, it doesn't feel very expedited. And she said, I know, but you have to recognize that these things can take years. It didn't help me feel less anxious about getting things in for my degree here, but it did help me realize that I was in this for the long haul, and beyond my beyond this program, I'm still going to have a relationship with Miranda and with Children's Hospital. We're still going to have hours over there. So this is a long, long-term vision, and this is only the beginning. So that felt good. More revisions. Here's just to give you the overall picture. So this is what I have on my IRB under the project, showing you from draft submitted December 21st, 2016 through April 30th. And I can just tell you the interesting thing about the last leg of this is every other step along the way, I would go back to Dr. Cahill, I would go back to Dr. Ozanov with everything that I wrote. Very much like in the beginning we would do with Suzanne, for revisions, for editing. I recognized how important that was to have someone else with more experience looking at what you're writing and what you're typing up. The last one, I did not. I did not. It was a Saturday. I received 2 questions. I looked at them. I thought, I know what Dr. Ozanov will tell me about this. He never told me I couldn't do this. He just always said, feel free to run things by me. But I responded, submitted, and it was just interesting because the very next day they approved it. Do I think that could have happened the first week? No, I do not. But it did help me feel a little more empowered. Like, I'm getting the hang of this. Like, I'm starting to better understand how this all works. So there's my official approval, April 30th. And that's good for a year. So it will not take a year. It will take 4 weeks. It's a 4-week study at this point. And descriptive observational study, 8 pediatric patients. The idea is 4 weeks. That is not absolutely set in stone. I could, depends on the scheduling. It could be a little bit shorter. It will be on inpatient and outpatient pediatric neuroscience units during EEG testing. this was another area where the nursing council thought maybe you shouldn't do inpatient and outpatient because there will naturally be differences. And my response was, and I want to see what the differences are. So we didn't always agree, but the goals of the study to collect all the and analyze demographic information, including age, gender, race, ethnicity, diagnoses, to measure the time it takes to complete EEG lead placement during music therapy interventions, and to determine the rate of restraint. And I left in sedating interventions here, and I'll tell you why. Because my best guess is that we were able at some point to build on this study and use it in other areas of the hospital, and I know that in almost every other area of the hospital, sedating medications is a key way that they help the children cope. But I meant to say this earlier. One of the things that really stood out for me in an article by, I think it was Hosh, was the writer of this article, talking about how when you need to use a papoose or any kind of restraint or sedating medications, that you're taking away the child's not just freedom, but you're taking away the child's opportunity to learn coping skills. You know, and that if you do that as the protocol without even assessing whether there are other options, the child over time will be much less likely to develop good coping skills. So that just really, for me, hit home. It's not about me feeling that it's wrong or that it's uncomfortable. It's about the child developing the ability to look to other things like music, even to some of the refocusing techniques that Child Life uses, and that should be an absolute last resort. So we compromised on 18 months to 12 years. It's not 0 to 18 anymore. And they would, for eligibility, they would need to be scheduled already to receive EEG lead placement. Ordered for the standard EEG lead number. I needed to really think about this, because what if they were ordered for many more electrodes than the average? Well, that would affect the timing. Assigned to receive procedural support through Child Life specialists. So there can't be any, this is the typical protocol, so nothing can be different about this. Exclusion, I kind of covered that. Here's the working model that I found so helpful that Suzanne pointed me to. Really helped me better understand what I'm already doing, in a way. You know, the role of the therapist, the role of music, client responses, how that all is part of the experience of the procedure itself, in addition to your personal variables, the demands of the procedure, contextual variables, and then you have these outcomes in the moment, right? But what do we do in the moment? We adjust, we make adjustments. And this next part helped me a lot, and Joy pointed me towards this receptive listening text, because I needed to really think about a way to provide a protocol that would be replicable. I can't just do it my way and assume that would be how someone else would do it. So it's going to be live music. I'm going to be following a very clear protocol about when receptive listening would be used, when active music engagement would be used, what types of instruments would be used. So I always go in with smaller instruments because it's a smaller, the procedure room is rather small. And this would be the largest instrument that I would bring into the room. And I would adjust what music I'm providing based on the needs of the moment. That's the part that I can't really get around. It's not play this chord all of the time. So that part is up to the music therapist, but I think I provided enough consistency. It was really the best that I could do, because one thing I really wanted to test early on was the difference between live music and recorded music, and I think it was Joy who said, let's first see what live music does. Let's first focus on live music. Study assessments, use or non-use of mechanical restraints, use or non-use of sedating medications. A lot of this I've said earlier. It's important to record the number of electrodes so we can balance that with the time in minutes in data analysis, and then patient characteristics. And here are the procedures. For being able to follow my own protocol, but also for replicability, I needed to really talk about every step of the way. When will we leave the room? I needed to really consider, what if the papoose is used? Will I stay and provide music to comfort the child? No, decided absolutely not. That forms a possible association with the use of the papoose and the music. perhaps the child continues to be really distraught. At that point, it's not that I have failed, but at that point, the papoose has been used, and that's the mark that it's going to receive in the data. So I could stay, but typically that would not be. In fact, the child life specialist also was saying that she would not stay. So we decided we would phase out if the papoose is used. Yeah, that's this last part here. For analysis, I'll be very honest, a lot of this is Dr. Osnoff's work. He's not using SPSS, he's using SAS. He has many ideas. Even for this small observational descriptive study, he has many, many ideas about how we're going to analyze this. And it's not the t-test that I was looking at, obviously, in the very beginning, because we don't have a control group. So this is kind of the end of my presentation, but I wanted to end it by sharing with you, in addition to Cezanne and all these other inspirations that I needed to get through this, I sometimes just needed to go back and listen to or view videos or just be present in the moment with a patient to remind myself why I'm doing this, why it's important, so it's not just all about the IRB and getting approval and all these things. So we recently received an email from a parent, and this potentially could be part of a larger study in the future, and we've been talking to some donors about why this would be, it just happened to come up in a conversation with donors, but why this might be a great idea for a study, a longitudinal study to see not just what's happening in the moment, but what's the longer term effect. So if you're having music therapy sessions, you're holding music therapy sessions with a child for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's providing this specific support, and then the child is discharged, we oftentimes don't hear back what happens to that child. We don't know. It would be obviously against HIPAA for us to start trying to investigate all those things. But when parents do get back to us and they tell us, this is something we look back on fondly, and I still have a recording of a song that we did together, and this made all the difference in the world, which is basically was the email. It helps to keep us going, but I think it also could potentially be part of a larger study. So I will just play this song, very, very short. Let's see. Channing, how do I do this? Oh, it is that one, yeah. It's a song that a dad and I wrote together, often during procedures.
I'm diaphragmatic hernia boy, bringing lots of hugs and joy.
The dad singing.
To all the little girls and boys in the CDH ward. Now you know Marcus is my best friend. We'll be together right up to the end. And you may see us holding hands or walking down the street together. My operation was a success, even though they put 4 holes in my chest. But don't you worry, hey, don't you fret, for I am as strong as ever. Now the doctors and nurses on this NICU, well, you're all superheroes too. With Dr. Wilson leading this crew, you get some serious CDH buzz. It's been real, but not much fun. Been intubated since day one, but my tubes are out and I'm being released. Bye-bye, I'm off to tennis. I just tried to put that in.
That was something we wrote together over a number of weeks, and it really is kind of like what others have been saying earlier. It really helped remind me, and this was part of my original idea, to also do surveys with families, with staff, and that it changes more even than I'm just measuring right now. So to close, this is the idea in terms of building a research at Boston Children's, descriptive to pilot studies that we see in the future, hopefully to a much larger randomized controlled trial. And lessons learned. So entire seasons can go by with what feels like little change. Progress can happen quickly, however. So one must be ready to seize the opportunity and play by the rules. Research requires leadership, organization, flexibility. Maintaining perspective is key. Every detail of data collection is of the utmost importance, otherwise the data really isn't usable. Allowing small victories to serve as motivation to push forward. Know that the future challenges are to be expected, and it reminds me that life is difficult, road less traveled, quote. Communication is never perfect. Mix-ups do happen. There were things submitted in the wrong order, and that's going to happen over such a length of time. Important to delegate and rely on team members' expertise, but also trust yourself as well. Stay focused in the moment, keeping the bigger picture in mind, but only briefly, coming back into the moment. And lastly, research can feel messy and overwhelming, but there must be a beginning, a place to start, and move forward from. So that was my journey. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for staying with your vision.
Yeah.
And for the persistence and effort that you took to reach this important point right now. And to have learned all of this. Congratulations. We have questions coming.
Awesome job thus far, and I look forward to seeing the results. And I think it's worth mentioning, not only does he have to go through all of those steps at Children's, but now he has to go through Berkeley's IRB too, which is
Tomorrow,
which is, you know, after you've gone, you still have to do that when it's affiliated with an institution, but yes, so he can't even start data yet until we go through that process. So
right.
A couple of questions and thoughts. I'm kind of curious. Let's see what page I wrote my note on. Here we go. So when we're talking about the stress levels and EEG experiences, and pediatric nurses are amazing. It's a special group of people, but we also know that you know, children can pick up on stresses of caregivers, you know, whether it's a family member or a nurse. So I'm wondering, and obviously this isn't part of the study, but it could be a variable, is there a secondary benefit on staff for when there's music therapy present, and does that ultimately affect as well? Does that combination of the staff having that secondary benefit of hearing impact also the level of anxiety with the patient?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely something that I wanted to look at in my original draft of this. That was part of the, I mean, it could be quantitative or qualitative, but that was part of the survey that I had planned to have families and staff to better understand and be able to make those correlations between maybe staff that were saying it's really helpful and let's look at the time and what happened. When we made the decision to go with the smaller study, we did choose to not use the survey. Also, I felt like there was a lot of resistance to the survey in general because I had created the survey myself. I felt like in many times during discussions when it was something I had created from nothing, there was pushback. Like, well, let's see what happens. So that was one of the things that we did eliminate. In addition to the pre-procedure interview, which I thought could also help us collect some other data, although some of it was demographic information that we will be able to collect just from the medical record itself. But this is very much something I was thinking about, Joy, because I would say my hunch would be yes, that it does make a difference.
Yeah. And then my other question is thinking ahead and knowing that this has been such a process, and one of the things that we find we need more clinical research. We need those expert clinicians to be involved in research, but also realizing the time commitment, the ups and downs, and that emotional up and down as well as, and you had put down lessons learned as one of them being persistence and keeping your motivation. So how do you foresee yourself as you're changing roles?
Mm-hmm.
Keeping your motivation to realize that what seems like something you should be able to easily collect data within, a week or two can take 2 years before you even get approval to go through the process to do a 7-subject design, knowing, so in other words, how do you keep your eye on the long-term prize and keep yourself
Right.
focused? And what do you say to everyone else here who has gone through similar stuff, but like a Nicole who was hoping to go into a hospital, and she might look at this and go, "Dear Lord, it's just not worth 2 years of my life."
Right. I mean,
so
I guess
not even have data collection. So
yeah.
So what can you
Sure.
offer?
I think it's a very good question. I've thought about that a lot. I think that there's a difference between when you're trying to complete research by a deadline for a graduate program. I'm assuming there's a difference.
Yes.
Compared to you have a position and it's known that research is part of the position.
But
and there's not a deadline. Although I've had the conversation with some. Maybe the deadline's a good thing because.
Yep.
I think that's true, but I also feel like I will do better research. I guess I'm answering your question. I feel more motivated than ever. I feel like in many ways, because I've shifted my perspective on it, and I don't have unrealistic expectations, that now I can move forward and feel less disappointed with a little bit of feedback. And like Dr. Cahill was saying, it's to be expected. But I feel like there were times, I'll be very honest, but it took me a week to respond because I didn't want to get it wrong again, or I felt I had to go back to Dr. Osnoff. I had to start, it's that emotional response that you mentioned. I didn't feel that towards the end. I responded myself. And I feel like I can build on that. I feel like my writing has improved a lot, and now it helps me recognize why the researchers are so good at what they do, because they have had so much experience. So even though I've had all these years in the field, I haven't done this very long. So I feel like very empowered by this and very motivated to move forward. And it doesn't have to be this study necessarily, but I feel like right now my appetite in a way to dig deeper is has grown a lot.
Yeah.
I feel very excited to go back to this study, even beyond completing it for this program. So, and I feel like many others have said this too. Like now I have so many other ideas, but I think I'll approach it much differently in the beginning. Like I will never come in again with a huge idea for an RCT based on my own made up measures and my own. I just know that that's probably not going to work very well. So I would start with something more like this from the beginning. So if I look at it that way, in the months that, maybe there would have been a few exchanges, but it wouldn't have been such major changes.
Yeah.
Which is part of the emotional response too, thinking that you're going to do this really important, in my mind, thinking it's very important if it's an RCT, I'll be able to show
that's what we're told to do.
Yeah, I have to show that there's a significant effect, and now thinking like, oh, it's an observational, what's it really? But no, it's actually, it's the foundation, exactly. Yeah.
I always think of triangles. It's a foundation.
Yes, exactly right.
Get to that.
Yeah, that's why I used the triangle actually for that, because I was thinking in a way it's like the Maslow
It
thing.
is.
It's like I survived the IRB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah, and it's a great, I think even one of the highlights of listening to you is that here's a clinician with, what do you have, 20-some years experience?
Almost 20.
Yeah, 20 years experience, and you're an expert on music therapy, but having that humbling experience where that negotiation between I'm the expert here, how do I hold my own against experts who are over here, not get intimidated where I lose what is essential to me as part of this study, and negotiating those boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely, and I feel that way very much. That feeling like yes, I know how I approach this, but then being able to put that into language that not only other music therapists would be able to understand, but that Dr. Cahill was great at coming back to me and saying like, I don't understand how this works. Say this in a different way. I know it makes sense to you, but say it in a way where others will understand. What are you doing when you go? or if you're making this decision, why are you making that decision? It might make sense to you based on some music therapy theory or something. That, so that helped me to better define really why is it that we do what we do for procedural support. And for the, I mean, I would say that in general the protocol is very consistent with what I typically do, but also being willing to like not be so flexible, not go in other directions that might throw off the study, to be able to stick to a really clear protocol.
And to be able to do it with live music is quite...
Right. Because I didn't mention this earlier.
And have that decision tree within there, that you have
Right.
that flexibility where you're meeting the child where they need to be.
Right. One of the things that we do have some flexibility with at Children's is adding additional staff to our studies. That doesn't have to go through an official review, thank goodness. So in addition to having Miranda as co-investigator, I've now just added Dana so that she would also be able to do this and follow the same protocol. And it was very easy to add Mark as the new research assistant. So I feel like those kind of changes being, you know, not requiring months to convince anyone about can help this continue. Because I feel like this will continue. I mean, I'm going to stay at Children's, but my thinking at the time was even if I wasn't at Children's, I would want this to continue, or at least to help inform a future study.
Yes.
So to have someone else on it so that it doesn't just disappear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm done.
You have questions?
No, we're just excited that Brian spearheaded this and trailblazed through something that is very challenging at our hospital, but very necessary. If you ever step foot or work in Boston Children's, it's a wonderful, amazing place. Hence why we both have stayed there for so long. But research doesn't happen unless it happens at Boston Children's Hospital first. So even if it happens somewhere else, it doesn't matter. It's like... So we really need this opportunity to propel our program even further. And during Brian's time of getting accepted to this program and getting started, we did a quality improvement study, not through the IRB, and it spoke volumes to the hospital leadership and at large of what the impact music and art can do to the patient's well-being. And we did do a survey of improved communication with staff and within the well-being and happiness levels of our patients and families. And that actually gave us our first operating funds in 20 years. And that was just a QI project. So I can't wait to see what an IRB fully approved research project will do for our program. And it takes persistence, but this team has it, Brian has it. And sticking with your goals no matter where they're at, I think is going to be really important, because Brian is a leader within our 4 music therapists. He drives me, I drive him, and I think we only have upwards to go. When you ask what's next for him, we are reevaluating what a music therapist position can look like, and can it be a research-based position with Brian. So him being a part of this program has really changed our perspective of the hospital too. So I think we have a lot of gratitude for Brian for taking this journey, is really what I want to say.
Thank you, Miranda. I do have to say thank you for the QI research that you did, which helped our program grow really. I don't even, it's more than twice, whatever it is. Went from like 50 hours to 130 hours. And also the connections that you made through that process with Dr. Osanoff and others. I don't know that I would have been able to do this had you not done the creative arts research. So I think it's this process of building that, you know, and now Dana's involved in other research. There are so many ideas others are having for research. So
I think what I'm learning from this is the strategic approach that you've taken, that you couldn't have done this in any less time. You couldn't have done this without the team that trusted you and that came together with leaders like yourself clinically and leading researchers. And so really doing it right is the only way to make it work.
that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and what seemed, you know, because my timeline through in this program was one thing, but that doesn't really matter to the IRB there. They want, it has to be, you know, it's the gold standard. Even if it's an observational descriptive study, it doesn't matter. It needs to be done right. So once you realize that, it's in a way very freeing, because it's that you know that you can't rush something through. If you want to get it through, just do it right.
So could you answer for me a very simple question? You said that with this survey that you had written, well, it's just something that I wrote, and
Right.
that wouldn't be accepted. And I'm reminded of how many times in music therapy we say, but there isn't a standardized test that measures what I want to measure. And there isn't an existing survey that's looking at the kinds of outcomes that we, only music therapists, observe and know.
Right.
So I think I myself can relate to being rather protective and radical, and well, I'm going to push this through, because it's the only way. But clearly, you're much more mature professional than I am there. No, in terms of that decision of saying no, I understand why my own little questionnaire is not going to do it. It's not going to fit this bill. Could you explain to us why that is?
I mean, I think Miranda said a bit about this too, and I mean, I'm a very intuitive person, and I think I could tell you just by the look on Dr. Cahill's face as she read through my survey, thinking like, they're never going to buy into this. I mean, it's not only not a validated tool, but it's something that's a graduate student's survey, and to use a survey, it needs to be something that's like a collaboration. I think that if we had the time, like the survey you created, but it wasn't something you just thought of out of thin air. It was like very much an
We
effort.
had a consultant.
Like exactly. I would have had to like bring the team in and really spend a lot of time. A survey is like something they really. There's just a lot of emphasis on getting it exactly what you said, like getting it perfect.
Yeah.
So mine was really far from perfect, even though I thought it was. It made sense to me. And also, what are you measuring with this survey, and how are you going to use it? That wasn't something that they kept asking, because I think if I had tried to make claims that the survey was proving this or proving that, that's where there's a lot of pushback.
Right.
Especially if it's your first study, coming in and saying, I'm going to show that you shouldn't be using the papoose as often, and you're making these larger claims. I mean, perhaps we get there at some point, but it needs to be based on that foundational. So what I did realize was my experience alone working there was not enough. They valued that. I think that's why they're excited to sit down and talk.
Yes.
But they rightly so value research experience more than that.
Yes.
So I'm hoping continuing to do research will be the way to and it may be using other surveys. There are other surveys. I thought about that too, just like I thought about the tool that you shared with me.
Yeah.
Perhaps I can show this to them. But there was the timeline issue, and their recommendations were pretty clear. So
Any other questions?
it's humbling, though. I can
Isn't
tell you
it?
that. It's very humbling. Yeah.
Well, I'd
Can't
love
be
to-
Picasso. Can't be Picasso.
I'd love to say something, Picasso. I'm going to share that with others. That's beautiful. Questions, comments from all of you? I know you're thinking.
I just really admire your persistence. I think as you were my former professor and supervisor, and you've always been someone I've looked up to within the field and practice of music therapy, but this is like taking it a step further. Like this is a procedure I aspire to be able to comprehend and to be motivated enough to pursue. And I'm really like just blown away by the amount of effort and it's just really, really cool to see what you're doing and inspiring. So thanks. Thanks for constantly paving the way.
Yeah.
We've all had you as a supervisor. I mean, you inspired us all.
Oh, wow. It's interesting, though, because it's hard for me to receive that feedback, I'll be very honest. Not that I don't feel good about this, but because when you do end up in a different place, there's still part that's, like I said earlier, like I'm really hungry to get back to Children's Hospital next week. I'm like, let's get the red cap tool design.
Yes.
Let's get in there. Let's do this data collection, because it feels incomplete.
Right.
It is incomplete, but the IRB approval is complete, and that
Yes.
was a huge journey. So that in and of itself, yeah, I am proud that at no point did, and not just me, but Miranda also could have said, this is taking you away from units. This is, but we also were in it together and recognizing like this is important. You know, I had to go in on weekends. I mean, I couldn't spend all of my time doing this. I have to be seeing patients, you know, obviously. It's not my job description right now, at least, to do this.
Right.
You know?
Okay, any other thoughts? Well then, please congratulate
Brian.
Brian.
Yay, Brian.